speaker has 20 years experience in the travel industry. Christian Tamte has been the owner of Zone Travel since 2016. She also served as senior travel coordinator for NetJets, during which time she led the NetJets Philanthropy and Sustainability Climate Action Committee. Christian has also written numerous travel personnel training manuals. And she is an Emmy award-winning videographer. That was during your time as at the NBC affiliate, right, Christian, in Indianapolis? Yeah. Right, yep. Yeah. Well, when I met Christian, I asked her about Zone Travel's mission with responsible tourism, which I had no idea what that meant. When she explained it to me, I thought, good grief, she sounds like a Rotarian. And here's why. Let me tell you what she's going to talk to us about today. Number one, the brief history of tourism and the industry's change towards supporting local communities and the environments that we visit. What's really happening when we travel? Where's our money going? Who are we supporting when we travel and when we purchase our souvenirs? And what are the economic impacts of booking hotels, tours, restaurants, souvenirs, etc.? How we can travel well and at the same time improve the lives and welfare of the people and places we choose to visit. And she'll tell us about organizations and businesses that are making positive impacts to local areas around the world. So Rotarian, right? Ladies and gentlemen, Christian Tamte.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. I think it's going to be a beautiful day today. I'm really glad to be here. When Joanne brought me to my first Rotary Club meeting, I was like, oh, I found my tribe. I think this is the right space. I just love everything that Rotary stands for, and it turns out I've been maybe doing some of this for a while. So I'm really excited to be able to discuss a little bit more with you today. So the discussion today is about responsible tourism, what that is, and then as Joanne mentioned, we're going to talk about a little bit of that history, bringing it into how we can be better travelers when we're going around the world. And so I've been told there's a slight delay on this, so thank you. So first off, I want to talk about sustainable tourism, which I know is not responsible tourism, but we're going to get to that. You can't talk about one without the other. And sustainable tourism has been around tourism has been around since the dawn of age. We've all been traveling in different modes of tourism since we, could stand upright and walk around and start moving. And we've always seen a great increase in financial incomes and moving around cultures and spice trades and things like that. And as we come into current day, back in the 70s, about 72, 75, the World Tourism Organization got together and said, we need to start being careful about how we're traveling, because we started seeing a lot more, before that even, we started seeing a lot more modes of transportation and the impact that had on the world and on the earth, and also on the cultures and communities that we're visiting. So they had the forethought to go ahead and start working more towards sustainable, and what that means, sustainable tourism and transportation and what that means and all that. And then in the 1990s, about 92, 95, the rest of the world started catching on. It started becoming more socially important in our conversations, and in the types of, we've started to want to, as a community, as a society, be more careful about how we're traveling. And we started to see that growth there in the tourism industry. And then fast forward just a little bit, in 2015, the UN got on board. And then they got together and they said, okay, well, we want to create an initiative that is going to be helping the communities and the earth and the animals in places that we're visiting. And they came up with 17 UN sustainability goals, which are on the screen. And I can tell you, I could spend a whole other 20, 30, 40 hour minutes discussing each of these. because they're quite interesting, all of them, and you can really get into all of them. In fact, there's a website, and I know it's really hard to read on this, so I'll certainly be able to pull it up later if you wanted to get into more of that. It's quite interesting. But all of the member states addressed and accepted these UN sustainability goals with a goal to complete these by 2030, which I think is a little bit aggressive, but I love seeing that organizations and businesses around, and not just in the tourism industry, but we're seeing it all over in all the different industries, adopt pieces of these sustainability goals and into their current practices. And it is great to see how many of these touch tourism. In fact, I would argue that all of them touch tourism when we go and move around. And in 2019, a little forward after that, this was the last stats we have prior to the pandemic. We have about the World Travel and Tourism Council said that there was $8.9 trillion contributed to the world's GOP from travel. So that's quite a bit. $77 billion of that is from what the World Wildlife Fund said is nature-based tourism and such like that. And then within that, if we get into that even more deeply into nature tourism, we have ecotourism, and that is where we're starting to see a 10 to 25% increase. So I know there's a lot of stats for those that like the stats. There you go. We're going to move on to some more fun things as we go, but just to show you that there is quite a lot of money that is involved in this to be made, but also that we're spending. And how we spend our money is important. As we all know, we speak with our money in all sorts of ways, from what we wear to who we elect to where we travel and what is important to us when we travel and things. And we're spending $8.9 trillion, and we can be putting that back into organizations. They're supporting communities. They're helping earth and animal conservation efforts around the world, also domestically and locally as well. It's also important to note here that it's not just all about money. When we travel, and a fun little side note here, when we travel, it's important not just from a financial standpoint, but there's some things that are worth more than money. And that's going to be preserving culture and preserving history. And I was out in Australia just as the world was shutting down in 2020. I got out just in time before they closed the borders. But I was out in the outback, out by Uluru, which used to be called Ayers Rock. And we spent some time, and I drove about 4 hours into the outback, and I saw not a single other soul. It was glorious. I loved it. But once I finally got out there, I met with an Aboriginal family because I wanted to see what their culture was and hear from them what's happening in their world and in their culture and to their traditions. And it was beautiful and also just a little bit sad because they mentioned, and I'm sure we can all understand and have probably experienced a piece of this ourselves. There's younger generations coming up that just aren't hanging on to the culture and the traditions and the art even from generations upon generations past. And they're starting to see that in the Aboriginal communities as well. So bringing travel and tourism to those areas responsibly is important as well, because it keeps those things alive. Because we talked about how much money is being brought in, that's also supporting those communities as well. But again, we're going to talk a little bit later about how to best do that so that we're not spending money to go to organizations that are taking it all and it only trickles a little bit down to those communities. We want to spend that money directly with them. So that's another thing. It's some things are worth more than money, and that would be absolutely the main reason, I think, besides money, that we need to be traveling and supporting this. So again, we talked about sustainable travel so far. A lot of those sustainable travel really is, it's different from responsible travel because sustainable travel is mainly focusing on planning and strategy. A lot of times ourselves as business and leisure travelers have very, very little influence on those strategies and the planning portion of that, but we do have influence over responsible travel. And that's what we're here to discuss today, is how we can all affect change just by going out and doing the things that we're already doing and just doing it in a responsible way. The responsible travelers, though, are going to work on minimizing the negative impact on environmental culture and environment and culture of the places that we visit, while maximizing the positive contributions they can make to local communities. They respect local customs, prioritize local businesses, and behave in an environmentally friendly manner. So that's kind of our goal. When we travel, we want to make sure that we're keeping those things in mind so that we can influence the strategies of sustainable travel. And it's really much easier than we might imagine. Oops, too far. There we go. So we're talking and drilling down into, how to travel responsibly. We really want to, and these are things that we can do locally here in Columbus, domestically in the United States and internationally as well, because it's not just about traveling responsibly, when we travel to Norway, Australia, Indonesia, or around the world, it's also right here at home. So we want to support those local businesses. When we are traveling, I love cruising too. I think that there's a lot of great benefits to cruising, including going and visiting, all of the different places and finding out where I want to go back and spend more time. But remember, when we talk about local businesses, when we get off the ship, and we're spending our money and we're shopping and buying art and things like that, we want to go just a few streets back, because everything, when you get off the ship, everything there they've already been purchased by the cruise industry. So it looks like it's local, but it's actually owned by the cruise company, where at least a portion of it, a large portion of it, and very little bit is going back to the community. You go a couple streets back, and there's families that are literally starving and literally not able to feed their families because they are no longer getting the business because it's being taken up right by this first couple of blocks right off the cruise ports. Same thing at the airports and things like that. It's mainly in the cruises that we see that type of behavior happening. So prioritizing local businesses, seeking those out, supporting that as well. When we talk about respecting local culture, traditions, it's responsible tourism to go ahead and be kind and aware of what is acceptable attire when we travel. For women, sometimes it means not showing shoulders or not showing anything below your knee or not showing legs at all. For men, it could be wearing something over your head or not. It could be something as simple as not putting your feet up on a chair or something like that, showing the bottom of your sole of your foot could be seen as something that is bad behavior or rude. So it's just knowing those cultures, rules and etiquette is going to be massively important in ways that we can kind of be better travelers. Everything down to learning even a couple of words when we travel as well. We've all probably been there when we were trying to get directions from the taxi cab, and we just really are trying to play the best game of charades in our lives just to get back to the hotel. But it can help out quite a lot if we just know just a few things, even please, thank you, where's the restroom, also knowing gratuities, like when to tip, when not to tip, how much to tip. These things are incredibly important as well. And when we talk about the giving back to those communities, honestly, gratuities are one of the best ways we can do that, because these are going directly to those local people. Even if they're at a large hotel that you're staying internationally or domestically, it's still going directly into their pocket. So tipping and gratuities are absolutely important with that. We're also going to watch about minimizing environmental impact. We've seen a lot of that recently, where we are asking less plastics and using more reusable glassware. That's your canteens. It's a metal or glass or something that's not going to be plastics. We want to try to stay away from those when we can, or something that's at least very, very, very reusable. And we're starting to see that too as we get into some of this a little bit farther in the presentation. We're going to start getting into some of the ways that hotels are using reusable materials when they build. And we want to support those businesses that are using those reusable and sustainable materials when they're building out their hotels, or the amenity kits that they're giving to us when we check into the hotels. These things are all things that we can be keeping in mind when we're going to be purchasing things. And also educate yourself and others. So when we know better, we do better. And part of that is also letting other people know better, and in a kind way, of course. and so that we can all do better along the way. So a lot of times when we are booking travel, my wife before I came along too, and even it's before I got into the travel industry, would go to Expedia and just book away and then go travel, and that was the end of it. And there is nothing wrong with that. And I think that's how most of us travel. In fact, as the travel industry has changed, we've started seeing that less travel agents because travel has become much more accessible for the rest of us to go ahead and book directly with places, which I think is wonderful. It's just we have to be careful about now how we're booking things. So most of the three largest brands and hotels are Marriott, Hilton, and Hyatt. And if most of you probably have a favorite within that, and we're going to talk about good, better, best within responsible tourism and sustainable tourism within that space. I didn't put in here airlines, but I'm also going to touch base on which airlines we fly on make a big difference, and making some better choices when we're choosing to fly to these destinations as well. So when we talk about good, we're going to start off with Marriott. So Marriott has many, many different organizations below them and businesses, they're a part of their brand. Their top four that I would choose to myself to travel with. The Element hotels are excellent. They have a large focus on wellness, but a huge focus on sustainability. So if you walk in there, you're going to see a lot of sustainable and like when I say sustainable foods, I mean like foods that are locally sourced, things that are going to be, staying away from like the palm oils that are taking taking down forests in South America and things like that. We're talking about using, reusable glasses. We're using glassware. We're using Swell water bottles and things like that. They're working with organizations locally as well to be tied into that as well, that local community. And all of their buildings are LEED certified. So that's going to be a great energy saver as well. The Westin hotels and resorts also have quite a few sustainability initiatives. They're energy efficient light bulbs and all sorts of other features within their hotel as well. And again, sustainable food and beverage options, which are great. Le Meridien, which is fantastic brand, a little bit higher echelon there. Again, they promote a lot of local culture and heritage within their brand. So it's a wonderful, if you're going to go to a Marriott property, a Le Meridien, it's going to be a great choice for you as well. AC hotels. I like the AC hotels as well. They tend to be more boutique kind of a feel. So it ties back into that local community a lot easier than some of the larger big box hotels within the Marriott brand. And they also work on minimizing waste and energy consumption. So good option. Marriott is a fantastic option if you're going to start there, but we can do better than that. The Hyatt and the Hilton brands both do a better job. And you'll notice here that I didn't include IHG. IHG is part of the Holiday Inn network. And the interesting thing about IHG, and don't get me wrong, I love IHG, I love the Holiday Inn brands because that's your Continentals, that's your DoubleTree, that's Kimpton Hotel. I love the Kimpton properties because they're very, and they choose a little bit of a difference. We talk about these UN sustainability goals. It's not so much earth and animal conservation that they focus on. They focus on more of a social justice integration into their policies and into their everyday. And I love that as well. The difference is that Marriott, Hyatt, and Hilton, they work a little bit different in that they have the brand and then they create brands below them, whereas IHG kind of acquires brands. So they operate very independently as opposed to Marriott, Hyatt, and Hilton, which are going to be kind of owned differently. So we're going to touch base on some of those as well. But when we talk about good, better, and best, better is going to be Hyatt and Hilton. So the Andes properties are fantastic. Hyatt Regency, Park Hyatt, and Hyatt Centric, all of these do a great job of sustainability and tying into better ways. And their materials that they use internationally are phenomenal. And when you go to visit these properties, it really does feel like you're being a part of that community. So if you're going to choose a large company to travel with, then I would say choose one of these brands here that are going to be better than going to some of the others that are not really caring too much to even include it in their website or in their day-to-day everything. So we can do better when we spend our money this way. And the other thing I love, the DoubleTree with their cookies at check-in, we all love those. And so sorry, DoubleTree was acquired by Hilton. I apologize. It used to be Hayashi, but DoubleTree is by Hilton, and they are actually that's actually an initiative to reduce waste. So that's a fantastic. I did not know that. Yeah, it's actually an initiative to reduce waste because they don't have the single-use plastics and things like that. They give it to you on the little napkin, and it's nice and warm, and you go and enjoy it. So it's a wonderful way that they've kind of started to do that, and they've been doing it for quite a while, if we can remember. So it's just those little things that each hotel is going to have a little bit with that. And you'll notice too that off to the side of these, we say travel with birth. They all have something that is tied back, and Hilton specifically ties back to the UN sustainability goals on their webpage. So they're very, very upfront with that. So I really do like choosing the Hilton properties if you're going to be traveling with a large corporation or business. But the best option, oh, Iberostar too, I forgot. Iberostar is part of IHG, and I love Iberostar. It's an all-inclusive brand. It's a Spanish brand. And everywhere that you go on these properties, and they're around the world, I love them, and they are fantastic because the sustainability is all over. But it's not just that; it's they teach you if you have kids and your grandkids or anybody's coming along. They have signage up all over the property on the walls and on the walkways and in the buffet line, everything, and it's teaching you about the animals, the local animals here on the property. It'll teach you about the sustainability that they're doing and how just being there is helping the communities, helping the earth and the animal conservation in that space. So they do a phenomenal job. They'll tell you why there's not lobster during this time of year on the menu because of they're fishing in that season and they want it might be breeding season for the lobsters, so they want to not fish lobster right now locally during this season. So they'll tell you why that's not there. And that's why I really love the Iberostar brand. But best of all is booking locally. If you need to travel to one of these properties and you stay at the larger organizations, that's fantastic. Please choose one of the others we just discussed. But better than that is just staying locally. Because when you travel internationally, even though you're going to stay at one of those other brands that's fantastic and they're giving back, most of that money is actually just staying with the business. Very little of it is going back. You're talking about minimum wage, and minimum wage is not what it is here around the world. So you could have, I think in the Dominican Republic, last time I spoke to a service worker there at one of the resorts, I think they were making $20 a week. They have to stay there on property, away from their families for a week at a time. And then, and that's a mother with like 5 children at home, and the father is back at the house, watching the kids during the week, and you're getting paid very, very little. So tips mean a whole lot. But again, when we're staying at those, that's where our money is staying, and it's going back to the United States and other places. We really need that money to go back to those communities. So staying at local organizations and businesses is going to be absolutely important to giving back. When we talk about this, and we go back one slide too, the other thing you can do is, regardless of where you stay, it's what you do when you are there. So when we are talking about the activities that we're doing and things like that, giving back to the organizations not even the organizations, giving back to the families of the places that we're traveling and doing. If you want to go snorkeling, choose an organization that is going to be filled with locals, that is a local organization that's going to be giving back to, or doing some research with the local coral reefs or dolphins in that area. If you are this is from Ashford Castle in Ireland, and they have something called the Make Travel Matter experiences, and these are throughout the world. It's by the Travel Corporation, and they come together and they kind of create some bespoke experiences that are giving back. They're based on these UN sustainability goals that are going to be giving back. So when we're doing that, instead of buying an experience from the resort, do the research and buy something directly from a local organization. Let me tell you, if you want to go snorkel with the dolphins out in the ocean, there's going to be about 500 different companies that are going to offer that to you. Most of them are local. So try to find a company that's going to be tied to the local community as opposed to buy something from the resort. And there's nothing, I hate to say don't support the resort. We certainly want to do that, but we can give our money back a lot faster and a lot more efficiently that way. Even the Four Seasons is actually a fantastic company to work with and to travel with. They do a lot of time back into the local community and the culture and the heritage and the art on each of their properties, but they also have a lot of sustainable activities. Well, this is in Bali, one of my favorite properties within the larger organizations. If we're not staying with the local company, is going to be the Four Seasons Bali at Jimbaran Bay. And they have some sustainable workshops, including a sustainable bar workshop where you can be giving back to that community and also learning about the local culture and having a wonderful time with some libations as well. So it's those types of activities that we want to be searching for when we're traveling. We might also want to consider, one thing we want to start talking about too is maybe what not to do as well. It used to be much more common. I love seeing that there's a trend away from this now to go visit when we're traveling internationally, to go visit a local school or an orphanage or even a village. And I feel kind of okay with going to the village as long as it's not the village putting on a show for us when we show up. We don't want to interrupt their daily flow, but it's really important that we not visit schools and orphanages. Because when we go to visit schools and orphanages, it interrupts the children's work day or school day. They also form attachments to us during that time. And when we leave, it leaves a big hole in the child's heart. And we don't want that for them. We don't want to disrupt that. We don't want them to feel like they're always on display either. So looking for some properties that are going to offer experiences for the locals, that is by donation. And a lot of times it's just by traveling to those properties that just by going there, a portion of your stay is going to give back to that local community or the schools. That's what we're searching for. And so that means that when you're booking, you want to look for this. You want to look for things that are going to offer donations. And I love it too when it's not the resort or the guests going to the schools or to the villages, but when those donations will offer opportunities for education for reverse. So for them to come to the resort, for them to learn from this way, that way we're not going into their space, they're coming into this other space. They're learning about what that looks like. They're learning about what that feels like. They're having educational opportunities, and we're not disrupting their everyday life. We're giving them hope and dreams in that way. We got to be careful though, because a lot of times too, and this all started, I started on this journey of understanding responsible tourism because for my honeymoon, we were going to Thailand and my wife really wanted to ride an elephant. And I really, really wanted to do that as well. I was so excited about it and I wanted this. And so I started researching into where to do it and how to do it and all of this. And then I realized very quickly that that's something we should not be doing and why we shouldn't be doing that. And it just took a turn for me in my entire career. And I started learning all about this and how to do this responsibly. And it's important too that when we're traveling, that we're looking at that too and saying, okay, well, and the same thing goes for riding a dolphin. Really, if you're riding an animal, it's probably best to not. There's some exceptions, horses, camels, I think, but even with camels, have to be careful because we really want to make sure that everything is, and horses too, we want to make sure that they're always taken care of and in good health and care. But we really need to be careful because a lot of times there's something called greenwashing happening. Because it's like whitewashing where we're washing away this, but it's greenwashing is when you appear to the outward world that you are giving back to the community, that you're doing something that is environmentally healthy or helping the wildlife, but in reality, it's not really what it seems. And so we really want, and the hardest part about this is that we really have to watch more than read. I mean, you have to read, of course, but you also have to watch what's happening. So for instance, there's a wonderful property over here on Akara that is properties throughout the world. And they have one that's called an elephant camp and it looks wonderful and you can give donations and they're helping with medicine of the elephants and these things. But when we start looking at some of the pictures, we start seeing some of the other behaviors that are not indicative of caring for the elephants. It's not actually an elephant sanctuary. Because if we're seeing chains, if we're seeing Mahout's like what he's doing when he holds that up, he's holding a nail in his hand. So, and that's how they're guiding the elephant around. This is why we don't want to go ahead and interact with elephants like that. It just looks innocent, but it's really not. So we want to watch for these things because they're not saying that in their words. They're just showing it to us though, because they can't hide it. You know, or you'll see like an elephant with like it looks like a zip tie in his ear. That's how they move him around. You know, or at any time, and if you see and they're riding on top of, again, we don't want to ride elephants, but when they have it, they have a stick, that's a bull hook on their hand. So it's not really elephant, it's greenwashing. It's not really elephant conservation. It's just let me show, it may look like this is, you know, and let me get your money this way. Um, and so we really want to just be careful with that. It's often misleading. Same thing with dolphins. It, you know, and I fallen victim to this too before I knew, you know, I went and rode, you know, had an elephant or I'm sorry, a dolphin ride, you know, along the way. I mean, if none of us have, you know, I'm not coming out this clean. I've done in the past, but now that I know better, I'm doing better with that. But we don't want to, even if it says that, you know, well, these dolphins can't be released and things, you know, it's not still good. We still don't want to give our money there because it's that process will continue over and over again. They'll continue putting them back into captivity so that they can't use them, so that that industry now requires you know, more money to go back into it. So regardless, we just kind of want to stay away from it. So those are some things that we want to be careful of when we're choosing which properties to stay at. This is from Anthony's Key down in Roatan, which is a huge diving destination. I mean, I plan lots of trips for scuba divers and they all love to go to Anthony's Key. And I just can't, with all good conscience, book anything into that resort because part of that's going into this dolphin encounter experience. And that is not safe. Like, it's not a good thing to do that. No matter how they want to spin it. There's just no good way around that. So just kind of keep an eye out for those things. And it's nothing that they're saying in the words, but we see by the pictures that they're not doing. So you have to kind of do both. You have to do the research on that. So to bring us all around, and I did want to come back, I forgot to talk about which airlines to go to. So I'm going to take a quick second to talk about that. We talk about good, better, and best airlines really quick. When I worked with NetJets and the sustainable philanthropy and sustainability, we also worked with sustainable aviation fuels and things like that, carbon offsets and a bunch of really neat programs. And we also worked with some of the larger organizations like Delta, United, American, Southwest, all of those. And so from that experience and working with those closely with those other companies as well, I can say that your good airline, I would say would be United. They have a good program that's giving back with sustainable aviation fuels, and they have a carbon offset program. It's just starting. It's kind of bare bones. But they're doing that, and that's good. Next would be Southwest is a better option. They are doing a lot with their sustainable aviation fuels, but they're also doing some really cool things with their recycling of their seats. So their seats are actually made of leather. And when it's time for those to be recycled, instead of throwing that out, they take that off and they make bags, like purses, and they also make soccer balls. And they are giving those to local communities down in South America and Central America as well. So some very, very neat organizations. So Southwest, I like. I don't like their boarding process whatsoever. It's Lord of the Flies, but I do like their recycling program. So I'd say that would be in a better quality pro category there. Best is going to have to be Delta. Delta does a phenomenal job. They work with the Nature Conservancy, in fact, locally and internationally. To give back, but also to have hands-on experiences for their employees. They are doing a lot with sustainable aviation fuels. In fact, some of their flights are already offset, which is great. And they are also doing quite a lot with like other kinds of carbon offsets and things like that. So they really care. They are talking about it often. They're not shy about it on their website too. So if you have questions, you can start to look into that space too. But and not to mention, I just think that their seats are a lot more comfortable. So all around, Delta's a win for me. This is all domestic. When we talk about travel in Europe, that ball changes quite a lot. I mean, the ball game is a whole different ball game in Europe. They have a whole different set of standards over there. And quite frankly, and when I was working with NetJets, also I worked with NetJets Europe as well. And I went over to Lisbon and I worked on streamlining some of their processes and also kind of getting the US kind of in a better position from that sustainable aviation fuel and some other carbon offset opportunities there. And I'll say that we have a long ways to go, but we are starting to align for that way, at least on some of the private aviation companies. And I'll say that in the scheme of things, and I mean, I worked with NetJets, but I was also courted by other private aviation industries, and there are other private aviations that are coming to a really cool space within that too. So that was a neat space, a really interesting space from someone who's really interested in like sustainable travel to work for a private aviation company. It took a lot to get to that space, but I'm really glad that I did because I feel like I was able to help move that needle just a little bit, and to see some of the inside workings of that was quite interesting. So from that's where I'm gleaning that ranking for United, Southwest, and Delta. But and I'm going to wrap things up and take some questions here, but before I do, if you are interested in learning more about what I'm discussing today, there is a phenomenal documentary called The Last Tourist, and it's available on Hulu, Amazon Prime, Apple TV, and on YouTube. I would highly recommend watching it. I think that they did a great job, and I've seen lots of documentaries on this type of thing. And sometimes you can walk away feeling a little beat up from after watching it. I really like this one because I think that they interviewed the right people. And it was taken right at the time of in 2019 into 2020. So it's going to be, everything changed after the pandemic with travel. But and so some of the things that happened in 2019 are no longer available now in 2020, but it is coming back. And again, I would highly recommend that documentary. And it's just so well done and timely still. So that's all I've got for today. I'm happy to take some questions. I saw you have that.
When you book flights now, they have like, your carbon impact. Is that like independently verified, or is that just what the airline is saying about those flights?
Yeah, so the question was when you're booking airlines, they have the carbon offsets available there for you. See, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times they have that. Is that independently verified, or is that something that they're just making up? And it's a good question because you may not know that the rankings, 2, 3, 4, 5-star rankings that hotels give are purely the hotel's choice. They get to pick whatever that is. That is not independently ranked, just so that you know. I mean, there's some out there that are, but it's not like the Michelin list where, you've got some, it's not. So that's a good question. And they are independently ranked, or independent, yeah, but yes, they are independently reviewed and ranked on that. So that's correct, yeah. That's one of the things that are very, very tightly regulated. So it's a good job. I saw back here, then I'll come over there.
Do you have any advice on taking pictures when you're traveling?
Yeah, good question. Do you have any advice for taking pictures while you're traveling? That's a hard one. Yes, I love taking pictures. They always say take pictures, not, things. And I would agree. Definitely take pictures. But that's part of that, knowing the culture. Like if you go to Dubai or the United Arab Emirates, do not take pictures. In fact, it's illegal to take pictures of other people. So especially women, if you take pictures of other women, and there's some cultures where they believe that if you take pictures, especially of their children, it takes the soul. So you really want to be careful when you're traveling to other countries, what the culture is. If it's a mainstream country, a third world country, it's typically, that's not really true, the third world, because that changes around the world. But like, depending on the culture, it's very great to take pictures. Just be mindful of where you're doing that and look at those rules ahead of time. I'll come over here.
Follow up on that, Kathy. So on the photo thing, my reaction would be, will you ask?
Yes.
But are there some places that actually it would be offensive to even ask?
No, it's okay to ask.
Okay.
I would always ask if there's ever, I say that it's okay to ask, it's always okay to ask, but that there's exceptions to every rule.
Sure.
But to my knowledge, I've never offended anyone or read anything or experienced anything that would lead me to believe anything different. So it should always be okay and respectful to ask in a kind of way. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
I want to add to the picture.
Yeah, picture.
It's good to talk to the local tourist guide or whoever is leading the team, because embassy taking pictures, embassies.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Government offices, government officials, depends on the political situation.
That's a good point.
So it's very, very important.
And I'll repeat that too.
Great.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So you can always ask if you're with a local guide, if you're gonna go take a tour, I always recommend finding a local guide. It's such a better experience. And asking that question to the local guide is gonna be invaluable because instead of you having to go up and have an awkward interaction with someone that may not understand you or want to talk to you or be offended if we didn't know, right? They'll be able to make that buffer for you. But then also, as you mentioned, that sometimes government buildings, in fact, almost always government buildings internationally should not be taken pictures of, especially if you're going through, some security lines or things like that. TSA doesn't even like us taking pictures, on the other side of TSA, looking back. So the same thing goes in that way as well. Good, thank you for adding that. I saw a hand back here first.
Having experience with purpose-built tours such as people to people, if it was originally part of the State Department.
Yeah,
And then for youngsters, things like the experiment in international living with students and with families.
Yes. So the question was, do I personally have experience with organizations like People to People? Right.
No.
I personally don't have experience with People to People, or the experiment on international living. But both of these would be considered, voluntourism, which is slightly different than sustainable tourism or a responsible tourism as well. Very interesting piece with that, and something I've always been interested in. In fact, I started down that path when I started looking into getting more involved myself. So that's a great question. There's some really great voluntourism experiences out there that I would highly recommend looking into.
One more question. You didn't talk too much about cruising and cruise lines and cruise ships.
Yeah.
I don't read anything good about, and you talked a little bit about stores and that, yes, they own the stores.
Yeah.
But what ships are doing to the waters and to the reefs is, I don't see how it fits into the picture of sustainability or responsible tourism.
The questions about cruising and about how the negative impacts of cruising, there are quite a few. And I'd have to say that I don't think we're going to get rid of cruising. I mean, cruising is the original first way of traveling for all of us, and just the way that we've grown and changed. So what I am starting to see is a change in that responsibility, and the sustainability of those. Do not travel on Carnival. Stay away from Carnival. Yes, Carnival is quite bad. They have been. I'm surprised that they're still in business. Quite frankly, they've done quite a lot in terms of negative impact with their trash. That they have been known to just dump trash right into the ocean. Their way that they treat their employees is quite bad, and it goes on from there. Their sustainability is just really quite bad. Just stay away from Carnival. But there are some others that are doing better. It's not something that's going away. So it's kind of like the aviation industry is you have to kind of make some choices when you're with the types of travel, and those that don't want to fly, sometimes we'll fly and then cruise. Sometimes people that don't want to fly will just cruise, and it's a way. And the way that I kind of look at this is we can just do better with this. And there are a lot of initiatives to make that better. And in terms of their fuel, in terms of impacts of what they're doing. But what I don't like seeing is, like we mentioned, they bought up all of those shops, all of those. It looks like every locals run them. They have locals in them, but it's not run by locals. So the money is not going back to the locals. So we have some room to grow within the cruising industry for sure. And at the end of the day, I would rather see people travel than stay home. So if we talk about cruising and that's the only experience they have to something international, I would rather that, because I think that it sparks curiosity, and I think that it can spark growth. And I think that we can see when we're there, we can see ways to improve the experiences that are currently happening.
Any good cruise lines?
I like Norwegian and Royal. I think that they do a good job. They're not like the airline industry or the hotel industry that have really done, they're real strong and proud of their sustainability and responsible tourism. This doesn't exist really within the cruise industry. I like Celebrity too, but we talk about who's owning what. I mean, that I think is part of, you know, I think Celebrity, I have to look and see, because I don't want to misspeak who owns Celebrity. I can't remember just right now. But experience-wise, Celebrity is quite nice for us. But what it's doing to the industry is we have to budget. And a lot of that's on us when we travel. So thank you.